I'm Jay Kumar, the BassBlaster, and this is your Abu Garcia Revo top 5 baits and techniques of the month. We haven't had any major tournaments or tournament wins yet, but we have had a cool new bait introduction, so we're gonna hit that this month. Number 1. First, we gotta start with the question, what are forward-facing sonar baits? Hey, well, lucky for you, Ozzy, I can help. Here's a rundown of what they are from last week's Seafoam Top 5 of the Week in bass fishing. Just what are forward-facing sonar baits?
It's the next big thing. We'll talk about it later.
Well, at first, forward-facing sonar baits were anything that showed up well on forward-facing sonar and could be used to catch suspended fish, like a little swim bait. But as you just saw, we're getting far beyond that now.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
You got it, Captain Stubing. Okay, so what are forward-facing sonar baits right now? Well, my take on it is they are fished through the entire water column, top to bottom. They have actions that are chill to aggro, basically. You can do anything with it, or many different things with it. Baits that can stay in the strike zone longer, and anglers, fishermen can manipulate the baits ourselves watching the screen to get the fish to react to them. Now, I thought that was pretty good, but Walleye Pro John Hoyer, who was involved in designing some of the new forward-facing sonar baits for Berkley, had a lot more insightful take on it, I thought. Let's check it out. He says forward-facing sonar baits are easy to cast into the wind. He likes to point his boat into the wind when he's using forward-facing sonar for the best boat control, because of course you want to be able to present that bait properly. It's a bait that shows up great on the screen so he can see the bait in all conditions like wind and waves. It's a bait that gets down quickly because as soon as you see the fish, it moves, or your boat moves, so you need a bait that gets to the fish quickly. He wants a versatile bait where you can work at aggressive to neutral action depending on the mood of the fish. And what he calls finishing moves, a bait that has finishing moves so you can change the bait's action when it's right in the fish's face to get it to commit. Now that's pretty cool. Hope that all made sense. Forward-facing sonar baits truly are a new bait category or categories, and you needed to understand all that before getting into what's next. Let's go. Number 2. I'm sure you remember that forward-facing sonar baits first started out as a small minnow-shaped, fluke-shaped bait with on a little jig head. A bunch of tournaments have been won on baits like that, most famously Jason Christie's 2022 Bassmaster Classic win at Lake Hartwell, South Carolina, won partly by fishing for suspended spotted bass with forward-facing sonar and a Yum FF sonar minnow and jig head. Then last year, Jeff Gustafson won the Tennessee River Classic with forward-facing sonar and a Z-Man scented jerk shads, the smelt color of course, on a smelt-colored Smeltinator jig head. Gussie, you smelt it, man! Now, a lot of bait companies have come out with scope-friendly heads and tails, but this month we went into a whole new stratosphere. What I'm talking about is Berkley designed 2 new baits specifically for forward-facing sonar fishing, which, along with one they released last year, now makes 3 baits they have that are literally a new category of baits. Okay, first, the Berkley Power Switch, launched last year, looks a lot like your typical jig head and soft plastic minnow combo, but what makes it different is the shape of that head and the position of the line tie a little further back. Now together they make that bait hang straight horizontal, which is one big key to getting those fish to bite. And they also allow it to have different and sometimes random actions with different retrieves, like vertical jigging, snapping, twitching, hovering, and it can do more stuff like that too. One of Berkley's just announced new forward-facing sonar baits is sort of a hard bait version of that power switch, and it's called the finisher. What I mean is, apparently you can make the finisher do similar things like the power switch, meaning multiple actions throughout the entire water column. The original idea for this bait actually started as trying to make a wingless version of one of the best walleye baits of all time, which low-key is being used by a lot of bass fishermen deep, the Rapala jigging rap. So like the jigging rap, the Berkley finisher has kind of a spiraling action, I believe, as it falls, and an erratic action as you jerk it. But like the power switch, it does a lot more than that, like you're seeing a little of here. Man, that tail swim action is crazy to see in person. Now, two important details to make note of. One is that depending on what size finisher you use, there are 3 sizes, it can fall slower than that power switch. Of course, that can be an advantage sometimes. The other big difference is that the power switch has 1 hook and this one has 2 trebles. So if the fish are swiping at it, the finisher wins, man.
It just does. It just does.
Number 3. Now the other new bait Berkley just introduced is this deal right here, the Krej, K-R-E-J, which is jerk, as in jerkbait, spelled backwards, and that thing kind of does look like a upside down jerkbait. Now jerkbaits also were an early adopted bait for using with forward facing sonar, but when you look at this bait, you'll get a clue about why they named it a backwards jerk. So when you jerk it, it comes up in the water column. And when you give it slack or you lower your rod tip, it wiggles backwards down. It sinks at about 1 foot per second. In other words, the Krej has the exact opposite action of a jerkbait. Man, can you imagine fishing brush piles or docks with this thing? Man, you can jerk it away and let it come back and jerk it away and let it come back maybe to infinity.
And beyond!
Man, personally, I can't wait to fish it. Anyhow, the Krej is different than the other 2 Berkley forward-facing sonar baits, but once again, it could be fished throughout the entire water column, bottom to top. It has different actions, and you can keep it in the fish's face and manipulate its action to get them to commit. That's what these new forward-facing baits are. Man, I told my old buddy Ron about this whole deal, and he was like,
That escalated quickly.
yes, it did. Number 4. All right, how else has forward-facing sonar fishing changed? Well, once again, it was first little soft jerk baits for suspended fish mostly, and also jerk baits for suspended fish mostly around brush piles. But now? Come on, Dave, give me a break. It's not crazy, it's fishing. Nothing ever stays the same, and that's the way we like it, man.
I love it!
Real quick, at the end of last year, we saw 2 guys win using forward-facing sonar and jigs. One of them was a Bassmaster Open on Watts Bar, Tennessee, won by Maine's Tyler Williams with this bait. The other win was a guy named Matt Ells, who won a tournament on Bull Shoals fishing a jewel football jig with forward-facing sonar. Guys are also using forward-facing sonar with things like big swim baits because once again, they can see in real time how that fish is reacting or not. Really, we're just scratching the surface of not just catching fish, but really understanding our favorite fish in a new way because, hold that thought, number 5.
What is that thing doing?
Well, it's a fish finder.
Now, of course, that's the movie Jaws, which came out in 1975, and that's the very first depth finder, aka a flasher. What does that mean? We've had sonar in boats for almost 50 years now, man. How has it changed? Where are we now? Bear with me here for a second. Let's talk about muskie fishing for a sec. Now, even if you don't fish for them, I bet you know about that figure 8 trick. When you get a muskie following your bait to the boat and it doesn't commit, you do a figure 8 with your rod and the bait to try and make that fish commit. In other words, based on your visual observation of that fish, you are manipulating the bait, speed, trajectory, the whole thing to try and get it to react, to commit. Okay, now how about ice fishing? Do you do it?
Stone cold crazy!
Haha, Freddy! I think it's stone cold crazy too, man. But John Hoyer pointed out that ice fishing with a flasher has always been about manipulating your bait, watching that flasher, and trying to get the fish to commit based on what you're seeing, based on how it's reacting or not to your bait.
You can watch your lure come down. So you basically drop that lure down. So now our lure is stopped at about 7 feet. Now we can watch fish come up to that lure. And when those two lines meet, that's usually when you feel the strike. You set the hook, and now we're bringing that fish in.
Now, I don't know about you, but I never really thought about that stuff that way. What I mean is, while forward-facing sonar is new and watching fish that way is new, watching fish visually and manipulating your bait in different ways to try and get it to react ain't new. I mean, in bass fishing, we already do it too. Bed fishing or fishing a shallow running swim bait, we're watching the fish to see what they're doing, how they're reacting. And what is that thing we're doing called exactly? Interacting with fish. That's what forward-facing sonar really is. Now, I gotta give credit for that observation to Berkley chemist, yep, I said chemist, John Prochnow, who happens to be the guy who invented Berkley Power Bait and Max Scent, Purple Power. Now, apparently the formulas for those things are a very closely guarded secret, and word is that a copy of Prochnow's brain is in Fort Knox and it's guarded by the Avengers. Now, even though I think we'd all like to interact with fish like this,
it's okay. I worry. It's okay.
We can't all be fish huggers, man, so forward-facing sonar will have to do. And personally, any advantage over the fish I can get, I'll take. I ain't afraid to be the top of the food chain, man. All right, that's your deep dive this month. Back at you next month with the Abu Garcia Revo top 5 baits and techniques of the month. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Abu and Revo. See you next month. God bless you.